Our end of summer getaway did not start well. What should have been a 3-hour drive stretched to 6. The Grapevine was down to 1 lane, traffic crawling as a wildfire raged just right next to us. Many playlists and many episodes of Wednesday later, we arrived, first to our Airbnb, but more importantly, with coffee in hand for me the next morning, to our true destination. Up, up, up the General's Highway we climbed, the landscape shifting with every mile. And then suddenly, impossibly, they appeared, the sequoias, majestic, towering, fire-scarred, and unbowed. And if ever there was a better metaphor for our city this year, and maybe for us, well, I'm not sure I could find it. We heard tonight those plaintive notes of Kol Nidre, the melody that calls us each year to the Day of Atonement. Tomorrow, a different melody and the stark words of Unatana Tokef, this litany of life and loss. Who will die by fire and who by water? Who by sword and who by beast? Who by hunger and who by thirst? Who by fire? This has been a year of fire. I don't have to tell you. I spoke to so many of you who were evacuated or ready to be evacuated, to some of you who lost homes and schools and memories. This has been a year of fire. Couldn't help but think that after months and months of war and sirens, Yom Ha'atzmaut celebrations all over Israel were canceled not because of missiles or rockets, but because of fires raging. This has been a year of fire, smoke rising from rubble. Here, bullets in schools and churches, bullets taking children and teachers, politicians and pundits alike. And then in this room, I know each year brings its own personal conflagrations. Diagnoses and divorces, deaths, family feuds and crises of faith, those moments in our lives when everything seems to be in flames, whether emotionally, relationally, or spiritually. Who? By fire. But then I think maybe the world is no more or no less on fire than it has always been. No more and no less than it was for Rabbi Amnon of Mainz, who allegedly wrote the words of Unatana Tokef as crusaders rampaged through his village, burning it to the ground. Maybe the world is no more or no less on fire than it was in Germany in the 1930s, Iran in 1979. Maybe, as with our mortality, the Unatana Tokef is simply a reminder. Who by fire and who by water? Yes. It is all going to happen around us, among us, and to us. Now, you might think, didn't she talk about trees once before? And I did. A few years ago on Rosh Hashanah, I took us to Lahaina, I wish in real life, to visit the famed banyan tree recovering after a fire. But tonight, with evening descended on this Day of Atonement, I want to talk about the sequoias. Because not just for their beauty, but these trees are amazing, and they have what to teach us this year, particularly if we focus on their seeds and their roots. And so I begin with a brief lesson in botany, just what you expected tonight. Sequoia trees are serotinous. Their cones sealed tight, waiting for the right environmental trigger. Sequoia trees, it turns out, cannot germinate until fire arrives. Only then does the heat melt the resin that binds the scales and those cones open, scattering seeds into the burnt soil around them. For sequoias, wildfire is not an ending, but the very condition for renewal. They are not alone. I learned from Ms. Weiser and Ms. Kleinman that some pines, eucalyptus, and even native California poppies bloom only after a blaze. Life held in reserve, waiting for the heat to make it possible. So that's the first lesson the sequoias have to teach us tonight. A lesson about desolation and hope and loss and resilience. A story that reverberates in our tradition, in the ashes of a destroyed Jerusalem and the ruins of the temple. The story is told from thousands of years ago of Rabbi Akiva, who happened to be walking around that destroyed Jerusalem with two friends. And as they approached the ruins of the Temple Mount with smoke still coming up from the ashes, a fox darted across their path. Seeing this feral animal scampering around the once holy space, Rabbi Akiva's friends began weeping. But Rabbi Akiva, he started to laugh. "Why do you seem so joyful?" his friends asked. "Why do you seem so morose?" he responded. They gestured and said, "This place was it. This was our holiest site, the center of our faith, and now there's just wild animals roaming around. How can you not be morose?" "Well," Rabbi Akiva said, "there were two prophecies. One, when the prophet warned that because of our sins, Jerusalem would be destroyed completely. But then later, a prophecy of the opposite, that one day life would return, that we'd be relaxing in the streets of Jerusalem, safe and at peace." Rabbi Akiva smiled and he said, "Well, now that I've seen the first prophecy, the destruction, come true, I know that that second one, a restored Jerusalem, cannot be that far behind." He may have been off by 1,000 years or two, but Rabbi Akiva teaches that once the fire has burned through and destruction has run its course, what remains is the possibility of renewal, the possibility that we too might be serotinous. Who by fire? We often hear it as a reminder of mortality as we wonder what it is that will undo us. But what if it also might be a guide for how to rise from the ashes? Rabbi Akiva stood in those ruins, and instead of surrendering to despair, he planted seeds. And that vision of possibility is also our inheritance. For centuries, long before wildfires in California burned out of control as we experienced them, indigenous people and later farmers would set what we call controlled burns. Fire for the native peoples was a tool that actually promoted diversity in the ecology and reduced the risk of the catastrophic wildfires that we have come to know and fear. One native researcher described it as linking back to the tribal philosophy of fire as medicine. The fires that we know all too well are a destructive force, but nature knows it also as a creative one. Because if you're a sequoia, you don't fear the fire, you're waiting for it. The flames that we might dread are for the sequoia that very spark of life. That's the paradox that caught me standing there. Something that we see only as destruction can, in God's mysterious economy, also be the beginning of renewal. But, of course, we are not actually sequoias, and we don't wait for fire or water or plague. We'd rather avoid it. Destruction is not the goal. We don't want to see our cities or our lives in ashes. But Rabbi Akiva, standing in the ashes of his beloved city, reminds us, as does the liturgy of these days, that bad things are, in fact, inevitable. Houses, cities, lives, they may go up in smoke. In fact, they will go up in smoke. And we'll mourn them and we'll grieve and we'll be transformed in one way or another. But whatever we do, we can't live forever in the ruins. We have to get up and move somewhere because that's the only way. It's not that we want loss or destruction, but when it comes, the question still remains, what do we do with it? Rachel Goldberg Poland, the mother of Hirsch Goldberg Poland of blessed memory, and the fiercest of advocates for the remaining hostages, has walked through fire, literal and metaphoric, in these past almost 2 years. In fact, she describes herself now as feeling like she has third-degree burns on her skin. But from that fire, she has a suggestion for us, for this community, for the whole Jewish people. She says, I think our challenge as we limp toward the light, as we rise from ashes that are still smoldering, is relearning how to listen. We have to master how to give space and oxygen to allow the person with whom we disagree to share their ideas and try to understand them. And then they too should allow me to do that. Amanda and I didn't coordinate. Emerging from the ashes means more than endurance. It means transforming how we can live with one another. If fire can destroy, so too, as Rabbi Stern said, can words. Our charge is to turn them instead into tools for renewal, to listen, to give breath and space, to let life grow. This sort of transformation, this work of listening, it's part of the rebuilding. And it's a key part of our vision of WISE over the next few years. A key thread in what we are calling our rikma, our communal tapestry. You'll hear more about it. Because communities that don't know how to listen, Rachel is telling us, that cannot disagree with love and respect, communities that don't make space for one another's voices are fragile. They topple easily, they burn, and they cannot regrow. Of course, regrowth is the through line of Jewish history, that we rise stronger. From the ashes, we are taught sometimes even joy is born. But who by fire? In 2020 and 2021, 3 major fires are estimated to have killed a significant number of mature giant sequoias. Some estimates suggest that up to 20% of all mature trees were lost. These unprecedented fires have disrupted that natural regeneration cycle, and these trees will not regrow. Because, of course, we know sometimes there is no rebirth. Sometimes fire is, in fact, all-consuming and out of control, a force for only destruction. To pretend otherwise in this city and in this year and in this world is naive at best. Our tradition knows this too. While the story of Rabbi Akiva and his hope in the ashes is a sweet and hopeful one, there's also a midrash, a rabbinic story, that imagines God does not swoop in to turn the blaze into blessing. Instead, the tradition teaches the divine presence watched Jerusalem burn and wept with us among the ruins. Sometimes that is the only faithful response, not to insist on resurrection, but to accompany loss. So I pause and say, if that is you tonight, we honor that loss and we hold your grief. And these hours give you the space to sit in what is, rather than where you go next. But if there is even a glimmer for you of possibility, I want to suggest that this very day can act like a fire in our lives and our souls. Yom Kippur is meant to burn away the facade we all give of saying, I'm fine, when really I'm not. It actually scorches our excuses. I don't have time, they did it first, I didn't do anything wrong. It reduces us to what is essential: love left unsaid, unspoken apology, a grief we have not let ourselves feel. What if, like those cones of the sequoia, our hearts only open when the heat gets really intense, when we are actually forced to sit here and confront it? What if tonight, what if these next 3 hours now, is a controlled burn, where we are called to stand in searing heat and see what opens for us? It might be a heart cracked just enough to let forgiveness in, or the courage to step towards someone we've been avoiding, or the clarity to see one change we might make in our life. For this work, for this adaptation to fire, is another lesson from the sequoias. Perfect for tonight, perfect for us, still not coordinated with Amanda, but in fire renewal and in roots strength. So back to botany. Sequoia trees, these magnificent, tall, sturdy giants, words that are not usually used for me, have remarkably shallow roots. And not surprisingly, the danger of trees with shallow roots is that they are, as a whole, more unstable and more easily deracinated in a storm. Trees with shallow roots, it turns out, need more support. And here's the truth: every one of us has shallow roots, even here, even now. Turns out it doesn't matter how much money you have, or how long you've lived in this country or this city. Doesn't even matter how big your family is. Each of us is one phone call, one diagnosis, one ember away from total upheaval. The sequoias remind us that no one's roots are deep enough on their own. Stability doesn't come from standing solitary and tall, but from intertwining. Because sequoia trees always grow in groves. They grow close together so that each tree's shallow roots can intertwine with those of the nearby trees. They grow close together so that their interconnectedness can provide stability and support, anchoring those giant trees from wind and rain and gravity. These magnificent trees hold each other up. In fire, renewal. In roots, strength. I'm reminded of a story that Rabbi Billy Dreskin tells, musical and funny and warm. My colleague suffered every parent's worst nightmare. And on the day he and his family buried their 19-year-old son, it was cold and rainy. He and his wife and daughters had not thought to bring umbrellas because who could think of a thing like that on a day like this? But he teaches that as he and his family stood weeping at their son's grave, they suddenly realized that despite the weather, they were completely dry. And Rabbi Dreskin remembers that as my family and I wept watching the casket, the rain didn't touch us because friends held their umbrellas over our heads. Even more remarkably, others leaned their own umbrellas forward to cover the heads of those who were covering ours. It was an extraordinary moment. Row by row, he says, their friends held up their umbrellas and in doing so held each other up. Row by row, they created that web of support and caring and love, allowing the Dreskins to weather the storm. In fire, renewal. In roots, strength. We know this interconnectedness here in Los Angeles on this Yom Kippur night. We saw it in January when thousands of volunteers mobilized after the Palisades and Eaton fires, opening homes, some of you, delivering meals, showing up for total strangers. We all know it in our homes when we are sitting Shiva, and members of the community who we might only know from pickup or drop off or a casual hello show up, bringing comfort and Kedusha, holiness. And we know it in joy, too, when we dance with abandon at a friend's wedding or set up a meal train to support a family who's welcomed a new baby. Row by row, root by root, we hold each other up. Sequoias are astonishing, not only in their beauty, but in their resilience. So, too, with us. Each of us can endure, can open under heat, can find new growth in scorched places. But none of us is meant to or can do it alone. Our strength multiplies when our roots connect, when your resilience sustains mine and mine upholds yours. We withstand storms not by standing apart, but by holding each other. And we rise from fire not by carrying hope alone, but by kindling it in one another. Yom Kippur affirms what the sequoias remind us, that survival is never solitary and flourishing is always shared. In that golden California light, I looked at my children standing really small beneath those towering trunks, awed as I was by their height and by their strength. That image is my hope for them, certainly, but really for all of us, that we too will grow into such resilience, that together we will face tomorrow's fires without fear, intertwine our roots deeper into one another, and keep rising, just as vulnerable, yet stronger and stronger, generation after generation. Gemar Chatima Tova, may each of us and all of us be sealed for a year of growth.